Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Podcast listeners, welcome to Making Data Simple. Your host with the most here is Al Martin. I have today Jonathan Friedmann. He is the CEO and co-founder of SpeedData. Opposite of slow data. We don't need any slow data. It's SpeedData. We're going to talk about that today. A little bit about Jonathan, if I could. Serial entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience in executive roles at semiconductor companies. He was the CEO and co-founder of Centipede, which developed IP for general purpose processors. He also served as the CEO and VP of R&D at Provigent, and that is an infrastructure semiconductor company acquired by Broadcom for over $300 million. So he's rich, folks. We'll talk about that. Super rich. And if I can continue, Jonathan's MO, because I do my research, mission objective here is this, and that is data is growing at an incredible pace. We generate 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day, and the existing processing units are reaching a ceiling and are unable to keep up with data growth. His point of view is that dedicated processing units are the answer to keeping up with big data growth, and enterprises can utilize big data analytics to speed up their analytic workloads. Hopefully I did that well. Jonathan, welcome. The first question for you is, why are you still working? 300 million not enough?
First of all, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure being with you. I'm not as rich as you imagine me to be. Far from it.
I can imagine a lot of riches.
And if I didn't work, I wouldn't have the chance of being here with you on the podcast. So it's worth just doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm just having fun with you, of course. We got to have a little fun in our day-to-day roles, right? So look, to that end, give us a little bit of your experience. I outlined some of it, but in your own words is always better. So tell us your experience that brings you to today.
I'll start with childhood. So I've been fascinated with numbers as far as I can remember. So I've been into big data since I'm a kid, always looking into numbers and actually always dreamed about being a mathematician and being able to crunch numbers. Unfortunately for me, I was far from good enough in order to be a mathematician. But fortunately for me, I was good enough to see the beauty in math and to enjoy others. Being able, at least partially, to understand what others are doing around numbers is a great. I'm fortunate to being able just doing that. So I'm all into numbers. All family discussions are always involving about statistics, numbers, and in any topic you might imagine. So I'm all into big data, and so I'm the typical electrical engineer. And following after I graduated, I got into semiconductors. I don't know really how. I was first all into numbers and doing signal processing and so on. And I was fortunate to be a part of a company called Provigent, which developed, as you mentioned, semiconductors for cellular infrastructure. We became a global leader in our market, selling to 9 out of the 10 biggest OEMs. And actually, even today, I would say there is close to $2 billion users a day going through Provigent's chips. Following Provigent, I was looking to other things to do and got into processors, first general purpose processors, and the latest venture is really getting back to my oldest hobby is big data and how to accelerate that.
Very good. So early on, you've always been attracted to numbers. What's the attraction? What's the attraction to data? Why does that do it for you?
I have no idea. My wife is constantly asking me around that. We can talk. I can talk with my brothers on how much it rained in every part of Israel every other day. And what is that reflect? How is that compared to average over the last few years? And what does that mean? and so on and so on. I don't know. I like that beauty. I was always fascinated with, if you look at numbers theorem and the beauty around numbers, constantly read, I'll say, half popular science books around math. I was never good enough to do the real math. I don't know. That's
Sounds like
what
you're pretty good.
makes it for me. Yeah.
Sounds like you're pretty good. Are your brothers in the industry as well?
One of my brothers is the chief scientist for the Israeli government in energy. So he's into numbers around energy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the other is economist in the Bank of Israel. So he's into numbers as well. But each one of us is numbers in a different area.
You guys got a racket going on. You guys got all the different things covered. You got the chips. He's got the government. You got the bank. Look, we spent a lot of time talking about software. I'm an electrical engineer myself, so it's good to get back into things like power and hardware, semiconductors, et cetera. Have you always then been in the semiconductor business, pretty much top to bottom?
Yes, I've all my professional life. I will say though that software is strongly related. So when you look at what SpeedData is doing, it's all about software and hardware working together. So it's not just about hardware. Actually, if you look at our company, I'll say over 60% of our companies are software engineers. So while we are a hardware company, we still have more software engineers than hardware engineers.
So before I get to SpeedData, a couple questions on your past, Provigent, as you pronounce it. It's a semiconductor company that ultimately was acquired. Obviously, you didn't stay with Broadcom. Did the concept of SpeedData really start at Provigent, or no, that came after? That's a completely different business model.
Well, maybe the first, not the concept, but maybe some seeds. First of all, one of the co-founders in SpeedData is Dan Cherish, which was also the co-founder and CEO of Provigent. So we go a very long way together. And after we split our ways, when I left Broadcom, we rejoined again. So possibly one seed. Also, I think some of the lessons learned from Provigent are also helped up in the forming of SpeedData.
And then Centipede, you developed the IP and general purpose processes for Centipede. Was there an exit there? Did it get bought out as well? Where did that land?
So Centipede has sold its IP, not a real exit. We have, we had a lousy business model. Selling IP is not a good one, a good business model. There are only, I don't know, maybe a couple of companies in the world that have succeeded in this model. So one is, of course, ARM, which has done that very well in processors. And competing with that is not a simple issue from a business point of view.
Just didn't work out the way you wanted it to, or?
Yeah, I guess that when we founded Centipede, it was really the death valley of semiconductors in the mid last decade. It was really hard to get financing for semiconductor companies. And then we had to, instead of doing chips, we had to resort to IP, which is much cheaper to do. But not as good as a business model. And I guess that was the beginning of the downfall.
It sounds like a learning experience. You did extremely well with Provigent. And that brings you to SpeedData. Why start SpeedData?
So as mentioned, the seeds were born in Provigent in the sense that once we were acquired by Broadcom at that time, I think was the second largest semi company for infrastructure. Second, and very far away from Intel, which was by far the first one. And when inside Broadcom, we were constantly looking on how to look at larger markets and to expand our market footprint in the semi infrastructure. Looking into what Intel is doing, that began over there. At that point, Broadcom has been looking to compete with Intel head to head in building ARM-based servers, something that did not succeed that well. I guess SpeedData is part of the thought that you can compete within the Intel in a completely different way via accelerator and not via head-to-head in a very similar to product to what Intel is doing today.
In your mind, SpeedData is a direct competitor for Intel.
Yeah, definitely. When we started off, today it's not it's not just Intel. So the direct competitions are definitely the CPUs. So today, Intel has its own battles versus AMD and versus AWS's Graviton and other ARM-based servers. So I'll say the number one, by far, the number one competitor to SpeedData would be CPUs.
Let's talk a little bit about the secret sauce as much as I can get it from you. It's funny because I did read an article that said how SpeedData accelerates data analytics. And then in parentheses, it says, as much as its CEO will say. Anyway, in that article, it says, we have not seen any workload where we do not give 20x faster performance. Any workload. So let's talk about that. I mean, what is the difference?
Yeah, I'll give some. But when I'm referring to any workload, that refers to any workload, any analytical workload. Okay, so we're
Okay, fair
definitely not
enough.
we're definitely not a general purpose processor. And if you would, I'll say the vast amount of things that the general purpose processors are doing, we're not going to do it as well as CPUs. But I would take one step backwards and maybe more important to first look at the huge revolution that the data center is going through. And that's the fact that looking into the future or even already today, there is no way that the CPU can continue to dominate the data processing. The data is becoming so huge and so important that there is such a need to process it, and I think it's clear today. It was actually not clear 5 years ago, but today it's clear, I think, to everyone around that the CPU cannot continue doing that. By the way, in all workloads, not just in analytical workload, this revolution is already more than happening in AI, and but it will be all over, and not just in analytics. I still say I still believe that the CPU would be very dominant in the data center, but more in the control plane and basically controlling the heterogeneous compute that will go inside the data center. And I'm saying all that to answer your question is that people are we're not the first, and people are looking into doing dedicated processors in order to get a huge boost in performance. NVIDIA, so just that, so we're saying we can do, we haven't seen anything which is less than a multiple of 20 in performance. While this may sound huge, and it is huge in terms of improvement, it is not a surprising number if you look at it. So NVIDIA has done that in graphics, later on has done that in AI. You look at Broadcom, they have done that in switches. The switches used to be done by CPUs, maybe in the 90s. You look at, I don't know, Bitcoin mining. This has been done first with GPUs, later on with dedicated ASICs. So being able to do substantially better on a specific type of workload is not a surprising statement. Relating back to your question, I can say that, first of all, the first thing that we are doing is that we are concentrating on a specific workload, and that is the analytical workload. And looking at that workload, there are many things that can be done in hardware which are substantially faster than in software. I can discuss a few of them. The first one is that analytical, first of all, the data is being held in analytics in specific ways. There are files called Parquet files or RC files. These files are holding database tables, okay?
Right.
Basically in a columnar way. They are not only compressed but also encoded, and have also nested data inside, and have it's actually quite a complicated way to hold these files. And there are multiple reasons. One major one is that it is these files are quite cheap in terms of storage, and later on in terms of networking, passing them from one place to another. So opening them in software is actually quite slow. It used to be good enough. It's far from good enough today. So you can open these files in hardware. So and if you are willing to put silicon that would be dedicated for that, which is something a CPU is not willing to do, you can do that substantially faster. Another thing, if you look at the analytical workloads, if you look at SQL as an example for a language that is being used for analytics, then you can easily find the common or the most common functions, building blocks that are being done in while processing analytics. Interesting ones would be group by, joins, count distincts, and window functions, and so on and so on. And if you set a target for yourself as an engineering and say, okay, what can I do that substantially better than just in software? I think you would find that this is possible. So we have a data flow, I'll say, processor that has special hardware units that can do specific things which are very common in analytics. And then, of course, there's a lot of software around that, being able to take an analytical workload and basically compile it to the machines which are inside our chip. And that's our secret sauce altogether, right? Building specific blocks and later on integrating it to existing software or analytical software.
I got everything you said, and I'm going to lead up to a deeper question, but I start with who is your customer? I mean, who's your primary customer you're targeting today?
So we have various types of customers. We can talk about a few of them. One would be enterprises which have their own data centers, on-prem customers. They would be a type that basically gives the full solution, have their own solution. They both buy their hardware and their software. Another type of a customer could like that, just to give an example of an hyperscalers like Meta, Apple would be hyperscalers examples of this type. But there are also many other type, small enterprises of this type. Another type would be cloud providers who are actually can use our solution as instances, providing their customers with analytical processors, as for example AWS as EC2 or Azure or Oracle or Google. Or on the other hand, they can also be providing managed services and multiple others of analytical engines that run over the public cloud. There's also public cloud users who are essentially buying from the clouds either instances, EC2 instances, or managed services.
I got it. Look, I know data, and I'm just enough to be dangerous in processing. But what's the decision point? Meaning, let's stick with the enterprise customer then, or we could be a cloud provider as well. But if I decide, like, look, I need a much greater level of performance, how do I go about the hardware switch to make this happen? What does that process look like? Because I'm talking on behalf of the listeners out there that say, look, I'd like to take advantage of it. I'm not really sure how. What do I do?
So I'll give an example. We're working with one of the top 5 pharma companies in the world. First of all, just to get a feeling, they're doing something which is called compound similarity analysis. Essentially, they are looking into compounds, giving them fingerprints, and then they have a list of millions of compounds, and they want to understand how similar each compound is to another. And just imagine if you have 1,000,000 compounds, just going through this list, it's 1,000,000 times 1,000,000. And for each one of them doing some processing, that can take quite some time. So actually we are talking to these guys, and these guys have shown us a work they have done in which they have built a cluster of 100 nodes, and they have ran this processing that they're doing for 90 hours in order to get the results. And we actually, so today we have a prototype running, and we have actually shown and that is done over 100 nodes. We actually have shown them that we can do that same processing on a single server instead of 100 with 4 of our own chips in 11 hours. So
Wow.
so for them, we actually told them, okay, you can just put it under your desk and have it as if you had your own PC. But essentially, customers who have their own data center have their infrastructure guys, and actually, so we can provide a solution either as a server with one of the big OEMs or as a PCIe card in a very similar fashion that the GPU is sold. We're a PCIe device, and that can fit in any server that can accommodate a PCIe card.
But if I'm a client, like the client you speak of, I say, look, I want to use my Cognos reports. I just want them to be faster.
Yeah. I'll give you the example for Spark. So we are providing. He will add the PCIe card, or we'll get a server from us, run the Spark he's used to, add our plugin. So we have a library plugin that we add to Spark, and from his perspective, it's completely transparent.
In that regard, you would always use Spark in that case.
Yes, for Spark we will have plugins, and we are now looking into Presto as well. So we will have plugins for that as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we will go after the various tools out there, one after another, such that the user will remain with 2 things. One, the SQL or the software he has written is untouched, and also he will be able to maintain the framework or the tool, the analytical engine he is used to. He can continue using it. So right now we support Spark. Our next step is Presto, and we'll go after more and more tools as we progress.
Does it matter if the customer is a supporter of Spark or not?
Today, he only has to be a Spark user. The performance number are over Spark. It's not just so we measure them over Spark. It's after, if you have any connector losses, it's after all that.
So to make sure I'm connecting all the dots here, and look, this is lack of my understanding, but is this like an APU? It's an analytic processing unit? Yeah, is that a yes?
Yes, definitely. That's a yes. That's the name we have given to the family. Also managed to get it inside Wikipedia, so you can look it over. What's an APU? That's an analytical processing unit.
DPUs, IPUs, GPUs. You have the APU. What's the difference?
They're actually completely different products. We actually have also just lately written a paper on that, which would soon be published. But essentially, DPUs are parts which are handling offloading the CPU from network activity. There are NICs or smart NICs, and are offloading the CPU from all network activity. So we are not doing that. And they are not doing analytical processing. GPU is essentially mainly for AI, and NVIDIA is trying to widen its market and making it a general purpose GPU, but it's essentially mainly for AI in the data center today. And what else do we have? We sometimes have other types of accelerators. Some of them are related to computational storage and are being held as smart SSDs and things like that. And again, are accelerating the storage part.
Makes sense. And just to reiterate, analytics, processing structure, semi-structured data, I presume, in the analytics context.
Yes, definitely.
Who's your biggest competitor? I mean, I get the NVIDIA for graphics, Broadcom switches, GPUs, Bitcoin, AI, whatever. Who do you see as your biggest competitor?
So I said it earlier, CPUs are by far our biggest competitor. 99% of analytics processed in the data center today is being done by CPUs. Just to get a feeling of how big this workload is, just imagine just looking at the most important managed services out there. You have Redshift, which is an analytical tool, probably or one of the biggest managed services. BigQuery by Google, Databricks, which is managed Spark. Mm-hmm. You have Snowflake, which is fueled by its analytical capabilities. You have SAP HANA, which is SAP's most important product, which is an analytical tool. So it's a huge workload, and all of it is being done today by CPUs.
Also, the discussion we had earlier, then you really don't have a competitor, to your point,
No,
because CPUs isn't getting it done and won't get it done. At least that's your thesis, right?
no, I will say so. So first of all, while I do believe that the CPUs will not continue doing that analytical processing forever, they are still my competitors, and I need to make sure that they will not continue doing it. But I would also mention that eyeing this market just as we are is NVIDIA, which is trying very hard to show that the GPU is also a good machine to do analytical processing. I would claim differently, but they're definitely eyeing this market as well.
They're probably eyeing you as well. I don't know. Um, you said something in the article that I read that was kind of interesting to me. I wanted you to say more. It said, because you rely on 7 nanometers, you've skipped supply chain concerns with 3 and 5.
Yeah, I will say, first of all, the world has changed in the last 6 months, but previously to these 6 months, I would say that there was constant worries around around the supply chain and the ability to deliver manufactured chips and definitely for small companies like SpeedData. In that sense, I have mentioned that since we have such a huge advantage from an architectural point of view, we are not we do not have to go to the bleeding edge in terms of process. Well, it's very crowded. Okay, you have Apple, Nvidia, Intel. Everybody's battling to get their gains from the process because the in the markets they're competing. That's a huge part of the benefit is being able to move to a better process. We are not there, and we're perfectly fine in being 2 generations behind in terms of process. We have such a big advantage from an architecture point of view. We can easily compete with a CPU in 3 nanometers and be substantially better than that type of CPU.
What impact does the CHIPS and Science Act that the U.S. instituted have on you? Anything?
Um, well, for the moment, I will say that so there is one big chip manufacturer, TSMC, which is by far the most important commercial fab, and around tensions between China and the U.S. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen there. And this pact has, I'll say, in the long term, does mitigate some of the worries around what's going to happen to chip manufacturing for the Western world.
I mean, does it worry you, or do you say, no, it's non-issue, or do you say it's just something we need to keep an eye on?
There are so many. The roller coaster in a startup is so steep on a daily basis that the long-term relationship between China and the U.S. I'll let Biden worry about that.
Okay, fair enough. I've got the information around SpeedData, your history. Also, we talked about some use cases, your customer base, competition. What's the future going to hold? What if you're a prediction, and this is just an open-ended question, where are we going here? I mean, you already kind of predicted where you think CPUs are going. Either they're going to have to change or they're not going to keep up. But what's your prediction on the future?
Zero ability to predict the future. We are already not on the brink, but more already inside a huge revolution. And it relates directly to data, not just in terms of analytics, but of course in AI and so on. And the world is changing at an astonishing rate. And there will not be a single industry that we look into that would not be completely different in 10 years from now. So I actually, as a late adopter, I have no idea how I'm going to keep up with it. But I'll say my only prediction is that 10 years from now, the world's going to look so different from what it is today. And hopefully SpeedData would have part of that.
I get that it's very difficult to predict the future, particularly in this space. And you may not even want to predict the future, given it's so dynamic. But it's an exciting space. I mean, you mentioned the CPUs. We talked about the CHIPS Act. Look, we got quantum that's out there as well. Let me ask it a different way. What excites you the most?
I'll say that if first of all, being in the in the deep tech industry, I think is like being in an escape room every day. You have to solve problems which are extremely interesting, and you always get the rush of, okay, how can I solve that? And on a daily basis, you solve one problem after another. I will say that if we manage to make a difference in the Medicare and in world and be able to advance the world from a healthcare point of view, I would feel very well with what I've done in this world.
Is that the number one, you think, that the biggest catalyst for change you see in the future?
You look at the future, but most of the things that are changing for worse, right? So the Medicare at least is changing for better.
Well, certainly if you listen to all the news, that's for sure.
Yeah, you ask my father, and he's constantly telling me that technology has not brought any good to the world. And basically, most of the things are just become much worse, and it's better to stay where we were.
Is this the family debate you talked about earlier? That, well, you've got a little bit of everything, it sounds like, in your family. You got the politics, banking, you got deep tech. I'm sure your father, I'd like to be a fly on that wall just to listen to those discussions.
Yeah, my father comes from the law industry, and he hasn't managed to find, to have a single child practicing law.
So he's bent on that. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anything that we should have said or a question you wish I would have asked that I didn't ask to really outline the value of SpeedData, or anything else that you wanted to discuss that we didn't get to?
We haven't discussed when you're coming to visit Israel.
I would love to. I've actually not been. I've been all the way around the world. I haven't been to Israel. I'd love to come to Israel. I'd love it.
You want to get familiar with the high-tech industry, you got to be in Israel.
I have a team in Israel. I've always had a team in Israel. I had a team in services in Israel as well. They're a great team, by the way. High performers. So look, maybe we can make that happen.
If you come, I'll take you to lunch.
I'll fly to Israel and go to lunch. That sounds good. Hey, last question. What do you do for fun, man? In all the CEO, the founder, all this stuff, new technology. What do you do for fun? How do you balance it?
I'll give a boring answer. I come to work.
You come to work. That's your fun every day.
Israelis are not like the Americans that have a life beside work.
Well, you may have misinformation there. I feel like, yeah, we're working 16-hour days. I think other places in the world, maybe haven't figured out, but yeah, we tend to not have a lot of balance as well. Anyway,
yeah, I love being in SpeedData, not just in SpeedData, in the deep tech industry. That's what I do.
This is your love. That's good. That's good. Look, all good. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing SpeedData with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. For all you listeners out there, I greatly appreciate you each and every week. Please rate us on your flavor of podcast of your choice. Until next time, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see if you'd like to be on the podcast or if you have any content that you'd like for us to share with you. We do our best. Thank you. We'll talk to you next time. See you.